Here's a question for you. What would you do if you found out your own grandfather had been sending you $7,000 a month for almost 4 years, and you never saw a single cent of it? Now imagine finding that out while you're counting quarters in your car, trying to figure out if you can afford gas to get to your second job. That's exactly what happened to me. My name is Megan Carter. I'm 31, and at the time all this started, I was working 3 jobs: ER nurse, weekend agency shifts, and teaching a nursing assistant class on the side, and I still couldn't make the numbers add up. By the end, my grandfather had been gifting me $7,000 a month. I never saw a dollar of it. What my mother did with that money was bad enough. What she signed to keep it coming, that was a crime. Let me take you back to the night this all really started. I just clocked out of the ER at 3 a.m. and was sitting in my car doing math. Not patient math, gas math. I had a quarter tank, a class to teach across town at 8 a.m., and I was trying to figure out if I could make both happen on what was left in my account. I ate cold noodles out of a takeout container on my dashboard and didn't feel sorry for myself, because feeling sorry for yourself burns energy you can't spare. 2 hours earlier, I'd run a code on a 60-year-old man whose heart stopped in the middle of a grocery store. My hands were steady the whole time. That's the thing about me. I was good at staying calm when everything else was falling apart. I just couldn't make my own life add up, no matter how many shifts I stacked. I'd taken out my student loans myself, paid them myself, never asked anyone for help. Somewhere along the way, I'd built a wall around the word help, brick by brick, until I couldn't even ask for it if I wanted to. My phone buzzed. A text from my mom. Sunday dinner. Grandpa's coming. I read it twice and felt my stomach tighten for no reason I could explain. He was the gentlest man I knew. Seeing him should have been the best part of my month. Instead, something cold turned over in me, the kind of feeling you get when a patient's numbers look fine on paper, but your gut says otherwise. Sunday dinner was at my mom's house, the one my dad built before he passed away, the one she'd apparently been fighting to keep, though I didn't know that yet. I showed up straight from a shift, still in scrubs, smelling like hand sanitizer. My sister Brittany walked in glowing from a trip to Cabo, carrying a bag that probably cost more than my car payment. Her husband Derek talked about his investments like a man who'd never lost a dime, though I'd later learned the only thing he was good at investing was other people's money. My mom looked me up and down and sighed. "You always have to make yourself look so hard done by," she said, smoothing a napkin. I let it go. Letting it go was a muscle I'd massively overdeveloped. Then the front door opened and my grandfather walked in. 80 years old and still standing like a man who'd poured concrete for a living, because he had before he built a company out of it. He came straight to me, hugged me so hard my spine cracked, and when he pulled back, his eyes were shining with this private, satisfied pride I couldn't place. "You're taking such good care of yourself," he said just to me. "It puts my mind at ease." I laughed, confused. I was a woman who reheated gas station coffee to save $4. Whatever was easing his mind, it wasn't my actual life. I almost asked what he meant, but Brittany called everyone to the table, and my mom's hand landed on his arm, steering him away just a little too quickly. I filed it under nothing. I was wrong to file it under nothing. We were halfway through dinner when my grandfather set down his fork, looked at me with that same warm light, and asked the question that would eventually crack everything wide open. "How's that check treating you, sweetheart?" I thought he meant my paycheck. Older relatives do that, small talk about your job, your wages. "I'm getting by," I said. "Hospital pays what it pays." Across the table, my mom set her water glass down a little too hard and pivoted, fast, into a conversation about Brittany's wedding planning business. "The way you grab a drop scalpel. I noticed it the way you notice a rhythm change on a monitor, a flicker you can't quite unsee." My grandfather wasn't done. "I kept that card you sent me last month," he said, smiling. "Stuck it right on the fridge. Best handwriting in the family." I sat very still. I had not sent him a card. Not last month. Not last year. I opened my mouth, and my mom stood up and pulled him toward the den to look at photos of Brittany's dog, her hand firm on his elbow, voice bright and loud. The moment closed like a door. I drove home with the radio off, that one sentence looping in my head like a pulse. "How's that check treating you?" "Which check?" I told myself I was tired. I'd been telling myself I was tired for about 4 years. The next morning, the mail told me I wasn't tired. I'd been robbed. The envelope was thick and official, addressed to me at my own apartment, which was strange, because nobody official ever cared enough to find me. It was from an accounting firm I'd never heard of, referencing in dry tax language the annual gifts made to me on behalf of a Mr. Frank Whitman. Gifts. To me. There was a number that made me sit down on my own kitchen floor. $84,000 in the last year alone. I'm a nurse. I read charts for a living. The letter wasn't ambiguous. Somebody had been gifting me, on paper, more than 3 times what I earned breaking my body in the air, and I'd never seen a cent of it. My first instinct wasn't to cry. It was to verify. I pulled up 4 years of my own bank statements, scrolled all the way back line by line, the way I'd scan a med list for an interaction. Nothing. No deposits like that. Ever. Whatever my grandfather thought he was sending me had landed somewhere else entirely. I called my mom that night, keeping my voice easy. Hey, random question. Has Grandpa ever sent anything to me through you? A pause. Half a second too long. What on earth are you talking about? She said, then softer, the way you talk down to someone confused. Honey, you're working yourself stupid. Go to bed. I hung up and stared at the letter on my floor. I'd just been gaslit by the woman who raised me, gently, expertly, in under a minute. So I started keeping the envelopes. The next evening, I stood in front of 12 students teaching manual blood pressure technique, my hands doing the demonstration while my mind chewed on that number. Count before you react, I told them, pressing the stethoscope to a student's arm. It's the first thing my dad ever taught me back when he was alive and I was a kid trailing him around job sites. He died when I was 24. After the funeral, my mom handled everything, the paperwork, the accounts, the forms. I was wrecked and grateful. And I signed whatever she put in front of me without reading a word. I trusted the strongest grief in the room to be the most honest one. If you've ever been the strong one, the person nobody worries about, you already know how invisible that makes you. I'd handled everything in my life except the one question I should have asked years ago. A week later, my mom asked me to help her clear out the spare room. I said yes, saying yes was another overdeveloped muscle, but also because I wanted to be inside that house. While she made coffee, I sat at her desk, where her laptop was open to her checking account. And I did something I'm not proud of, and would absolutely do again. I scrolled. There they were. $7,000 deposited the first of every month, regular as a heartbeat, smaller in the older months around $5,000, then climbing. And right beneath each deposit, within a day, an outgoing transfer of the exact same amount, to an account ending in the same 4 digits. Over and over. 4 years deep. I photographed the screen, pulse loud in my ears, hands steady, the gift of the job. Those last 4 digits snagged on something. Months back, splitting the cost of Grandpa's Christmas gift, Brittany had handed me a check off her own account, and I'd glanced at the number out of habit. Same 4 digits. The money came into my mom's account and went straight out to my sister's. I felt the floor of the whole thing drop open. But I also knew, sitting there, that a photo of my mom's screen proved almost nothing. It wasn't my account. I had no right to demand records from a bank that didn't even know my name. Suspicion isn't proof. A nurse can be certain a patient's septic and still need the labs before anyone moves. I closed the laptop just as Brittany's voice cut across the room. What exactly are you doing on Mom's computer, Megan? Ice in her voice. I smiled and said I was helping. I'd learned that calm from monitors that scream. I didn't yell. That's worth repeating because everything that came after depended on it. I closed the laptop, said I was helping, and went back to folding curtains while my heart did something complicated. Yelling feels good for about 4 seconds and loses you the war. I'd watched families do exactly that in the ER for years. Scream at the one person holding the answers, then wonder why no one would help them. So I drove home and built a file. Dates, amounts, the photo of the accounting letter, the photo of my mom's statement. I laid it out the way I'd chart a patient I suspected had been quietly mismanaged for years, which it turned out was exactly what I was. Looking at it cold and clean on my kitchen table, I understood the wall I was up against. I could see the crime. I couldn't touch the proof. The money flowed from my grandfather to my mom to my sister, and every link in that chain belonged to someone else's bank, someone else's account, someone else's signature. I needed someone who actually understood how money moved legally because I clearly didn't. I'd spent years refusing to ask anyone for help with anything. Now I was about to ask a complete stranger, at a free legal aid clinic with a 6-week wait, before I'd ask my own mother for the truth one more time. That tells you everything about how far gone the trust already was. I made the appointment that night. Then I went and worked a 12-hour shift because rent doesn't care that you've just been robbed. The lawyer, Patricia Owens, had a cramped office, a wall of binders, and the unhurried patience of someone who'd watched a lot of families eat each other alive. She listened to my whole story without once telling me I was overreacting, which alone almost made me cry. Then she explained the machinery I'd been blind to. "Your grandfather wrote the checks," she said. "If somebody signed your name on the back and deposited them into an account that wasn't yours, that's a forged endorsement. The front looks perfectly legal, so the bank never blinks. The fraud lives on the back." I leaned forward. "So I pull the backs." "You can't," she said, and that's where my stomach sank. "You're not the account holder, and you're not the payer. Only the person who wrote the checks, your grandfather or law enforcement, can make the bank produce those images. So I need him to believe me," I said slowly, "before I have the proof that would make him believe me." She nodded. "That's the trap they built, whether they meant to or not. His trust in your mother is the lock." She let that sit, then added the part that changed the temperature of the whole room. "But understand, if your name was signed by someone else's hand to take your money, that's not a family disagreement, Megan. In most states that can rise to forgery. That's criminal." I drove home doing the new math. To get the truth, I needed my grandfather. To get my grandfather, I had to get past my mother, and she'd spent 4 years standing exactly between us, steering him gently away from me at every table. 2 days later, my mom called, sweet as pie, with an assignment. "Grandpa's turning 80 next month. We're throwing him a big dinner at his place, the whole family, his old friends. You'll handle the flowers, won't you? You're good at the small things." The small things. I held the phone, looked at my file on the table, and understood with a clarity that felt almost like calm exactly what I'd just been handed. Every person who mattered would be in one room. My grandfather, my mom, my sister, Derek, aunts, cousins, his oldest friends. Witnesses. You cannot rewrite a story that 30 people watched happen. "Of course," I said. "I'd love to do the flowers." In the family group chat, Brittany was already posting photos of the venue, the linens, the catering, the string quartet. Planning a beautiful evening with money that had come straight out of my grandfather's account meant for me. I looked at those photos for a long time. I could have screamed in that chat right then. Instead, I sent a thumbs up and a flower emoji, and I started planning. Rage is loud and useless. A deadline is quiet and patient. They were building me the perfect stage with my own stolen money. The least I could do was show up on time. Before I went around my mother, I gave her one chance. Not to make myself a saint, but because it mattered to me later that I'd offered her the door first. I stopped by alone one weeknight and found her at the kitchen table. "Mom," I said gently, "is there anything you want to tell me about Grandpa's money?" I watched her face do the math I'd done a dozen times. Watched her decide. She set down her tea. "You don't steal from family, Megan," she said, with the flat certainty of someone who'd practiced the line. "You borrow." And there it was. The whole architecture of it, confessed and defended in the same breath. Not a denial, a justification. She knew exactly what she'd taken, and she'd already decided it wasn't taking. I kept my voice level. "And when do you pay borrowed money back?" She looked at me like I was being deliberately cruel. "When I can. Your grandfather has more than he'll ever spend, and you've always been the strong one. Brittany needed it. The house needed it." Something flickered then. Tired, frightened, under the entitlement, gone before I could name it. Then she added, almost to herself, "He always did love a nice thank you note." My whole body went still. The card on his fridge. Best handwriting in the family. I didn't react. I said I had an early shift and left. But I sat in my car in her driveway and typed myself a note so I wouldn't forget the shape of it. Letters. She hadn't just taken the money. She'd been writing to him as me year after year, to keep him grateful and quiet. A different kind of crime. And I was starting to understand I'd only seen the surface of it. Patricia connected me with a forensic accountant named Mark, who agreed to a payment plan I'd be paying off for years, and who talked about money the way I talked about bodies, like a system that can't lie if you read it right. "People lie," Mark told me on our first call. Cash flow doesn't. He ran a lifestyle analysis off public records and the pieces I'd photographed. Brittany's wedding planning business had been bleeding money for 3 years. Unpaid vendors, a tax lien filed and then mysteriously satisfied. My mom's house had been one missed payment from foreclosure, and then somehow wasn't. Both holes, Mark said, lined up almost perfectly with thousands of dollars a month, climbing to 7, flowing in from somewhere off the books. I can show the money landed in their lives, he said. I can show the size and the timing. What I can't do from out here is put a name on the hand that signed the back of those checks. For that, you need the endorsement images. And for those, you need the man who wrote them. Always the same wall. Always my grandfather standing on the far side of my mother. Getting to him turned out to be its own small war. I called his house 3 times that week. Every time my mom answered. He's resting, honey. He's out with friends. I'll have him call you back. He never called back. She'd made herself the switchboard of his entire life, kindly, helpfully, and most of the family thanked her for it. So I did the one thing she wouldn't expect. I wrote him a card, an actual card, my own real handwriting, and drove it to his house myself, slipping it into his mailbox while her car wasn't in the driveway. Coffee. Just you and me. No one else. There's something I need to ask you in person, and I need you to hear it from me. Then I waited. And waiting nearly killed me because for all I knew she checked his mail too, and the card was already shredded. 3 days of silence. I worked my shifts, taught my class, jumped every time my phone lit up. On the 3rd night, an unknown number called. I almost let it go to voicemail. I'm glad I didn't. Megan. My grandfather's voice, low, careful, from a number I didn't recognize. I'm at my friend Pete's place. I got your card. A pause and something in his voice I'd never heard before. An old man's hurt, trying to stay steady. You want to see me without your mother there? I need you to tell me why, sweetheart. Because lately I've been getting the feeling something in this family isn't right. And nobody will look me in the eye and say it. We met at a diner Pete owned, a back booth, just the 2 of us. And I did the hardest thing I'd done since my dad's funeral. I told him the truth slowly, and then I laid one piece of paper on the table between our coffee cups. A copy of a single canceled check, one he'd written himself, which I'd been able to get a copy of through his own bank, with nothing more than his name on it. The front read in his own steady hand, "Pay to the order of Megan Carter, $7,000. I watched him recognize his own writing and smile, just for a second, the way you'd smile at a photo of someone you love. Turn it over, Grandpa, I said. He turned it over. On the back was my name, signed in a looping, confident hand that was not mine and never had been, deposited into an account I'd never owned. He stared at it for a long time, thumb moving over the forged signature like he could feel it was wrong. That's not your writing, he said finally. It wasn't a question. No, I said. I've never seen $1 of this money. Any of it. For years. His hand was shaking now, but his eyes were getting harder by the second. He reached into his wallet slowly and pulled out a small worn card, the kind you keep because it means something, and set it next to the check. The handwriting matched loop for loop. You sent me this, he said quietly. For my last birthday. I carry it everywhere. I looked at a thank you note I'd never written in my name in the same forging hand. I didn't, Grandpa. I didn't even know you were giving me anything to thank you for. And I watched 4 years of a lie he'd been living rearrange itself behind his eyes. He wanted to drive to my mom's house that night and have it out right then. His hands were flat on the table, jaw set. For a moment, I saw the man who'd built a company by never backing down from anybody. I put my hand over his. No, I said. Not like that. If you confront her tonight alone in her kitchen, you know what happens. She cries. She explains. You're an old man who loves his daughter. By morning, she's talked you halfway back out of believing your own eyes. He didn't argue because he knew it was true. So I gave him a plan instead of a confrontation. I didn't ask him to rescue me. I asked him to hand me the one tool only he could reach. You wrote the checks, I said. That means you and only you can authorize the bank to release the endorsement images for every payment, all 4 years. Patricia will send the request the right way on paper so nobody can wave it off. He nodded slowly, following. And then I said, we do it once. In front of everyone at your party. where she can't pull you into the den and rewrite it, where 30 people see the back of the check at the same time. He was quiet a long moment. Then, I made everything I have by never once being afraid of the truth, even when it cost me. His voice caught. Don't let me be afraid of it now. Even if it's my own daughter. We shook on it. An 80-year-old man and his granddaughter in a diner booth. For the first time in 4 years, I didn't feel like I was drowning alone. The request went out on Patricia's letterhead, signed by my grandfather. And then came the part nobody tells you about, the waiting. Banks don't produce 4 years of records overnight. So I did the only thing I knew how to do. I went back to work and acted completely normal, because the worst thing I could do was let anyone see the storm coming. Brittany texted about flower colors and I texted back like a sister who suspected nothing. My mom called to remind me to dress nicely for once. I said I would. There's a moment in nursing where you stop reacting and start documenting, because the chart protects the patient when the shouting starts and memories get convenient. That's exactly where I was. Calm on the outside, building a record nothing could argue with, one careful page at a time. 10 days before the party, my phone rang during a break. Patricia. Her voice had changed. The images came back, Megan. All 4 years. You should sit down before I send these over. It's worse than the money. I sat in a supply closet under fluorescent light and opened the file. 4 years of theft laid flat. Check after check. Front in my grandfather's hand, back signed Megan Carter, in a looping forgery that matched the thank you note in his wallet. Every single one deposited by mobile capture into the joint account my sister held with Derek. He'd set up the deposits. She'd signed my name. Clean, complete, damning. It would have been enough on its own. But Patricia had warned me there was more. And the more is what turned my stomach. The endorsement images weren't the end of it. My grandfather's gifts had been administered through that accounting firm the whole time. And once he authorized the release, they handed over their correspondence file too. Folded into the payment records were letters, requests, updates, thank yous, several written as me, in that same forging hand. One, dated 2 years back, asked my grandfather in my voice whether he might increase the monthly amount from $5,000 to $7,000 because Megan wants to go back for her nurse practitioner certification and the tuition is steep. I had never written those words. I had never asked that man for $1. Someone had used my name, and my grandfather's love for me, to negotiate a raise on a theft. That was the moment the whole thing changed shape in my hands. The stolen money was a wound. The forged letters were a plan. You can argue that taking money was a misunderstanding between family. You cannot argue your way out of signing someone else's name to ask for more of it. That night I sat with a choice. I could take everything to a lawyer quietly, file the claims, let it move through offices, and never say a word at the party. Cleaner. Safer. Part of me, the part that had spent 31 years avoiding scenes, wanted that badly. But I'd watched my mom work for too long to believe quiet would ever be safe. If this happened behind closed doors, she'd be the one telling the family what happened. She'd say I turned greedy, that I attacked a grieving widow over a misunderstanding, that I tore the family apart over money. She'd rewrite me the same way she'd rewritten those checks. The only way to keep my own story was to tell it myself, out loud, in front of every witness who'd otherwise hear her version first. Maybe that's the moment that mattered most. Not the discovery, not the proof, but the decision to say it out loud where nobody could quietly edit it afterward. So I called Patricia and made it real. The restitution demand and criminal report would move through proper channels on their own timeline. But the reveal, the moment the family learned the truth, would happen at that table in front of those people. The one room my mother couldn't edit. I'm not doing this to hurt them, I told her, and I meant it. I'm doing it so they can't keep doing it to me. She was quiet, then said, "Bring only what you need. A wall of paper looks like a vendetta. 3 checks look like the truth. 48 hours to the party." I had a folder, a calm I'd earned the hard way, and a grandfather who'd promised me he wouldn't look away, even when the truth wore his daughter's face. In those 2 days my family did what they always did, made it easier for me. Brittany posted a story showing off an extravagant surprise gift for our grandfather. A watch that cost more than I made in a month, paid for, I now understood, with his own redirected money. Caption with something about family being everything. I looked at it for a while and felt the last of my hesitation burn off clean. My mom called with her final instruction. Wear something nice, Megan. Not your work clothes. This is your grandfather's night. Don't make it sad. Don't make it about you. I almost laughed. For 4 years they'd made my entire life about them. Brittany's lifestyle, my mom's house, all built on money meant to keep me from drowning. And now I was being warned not to make a single night about myself. I'll dress up, I said. I promise I'll look nice. Truest thing I'd said to her in months, and she had no idea. She wanted me to blend in, pass the flowers, stay small. I intended to be unforgettable. The afternoon of the party, I arrived early to set up flowers and found my mom alone at the kitchen table. And for one moment I almost lost my nerve. She hadn't heard me come in. Bills spread in front of her. Foreclosure language visible at the top of one. Reading glasses pushed up into hair that had gone grayer than I'd let myself notice. She looked old. She looked like a woman who was losing. For a breath, I saw her not as the architect of 4 stolen years, but as my mother, drowning in her own way. And the part of me that had spent my whole life forgiving her surged up hard. She glanced up, saw me, didn't bother hiding the bills. You don't know what it's like, she said quietly, almost to herself, to stand to lose the house your husband built with his own hands. I wasn't going to let it go. I couldn't. For 1 second I almost folded. Then I remembered counting quarters in my car for gas while she kept her house with my money. For birthdays where she'd warned me not to make it about myself. A thank you note I never wrote asking for more. Her desperation was real. It still wasn't a defense. I know what it's like to lose things, Mom, I said evenly. I've been losing them quietly for 4 years. And I went to arrange the flowers, hand steady, heart a closed fist. An hour before guests arrived, my grandfather found me in the dining room and we ran it one last time. He'd done his part exactly as asked, invited his longtime attorney, a careful man named Mr. Bennett, to attend as a guest. Broke no rules but meant someone in the room would understand exactly what we were looking at, and could say so out loud if it came to that. I'd brought my folder, taking Patricia's advice to heart. Not 4 years of records dumped on a birthday table. 3 checks, front and back, the cleanest examples, unmistakable, but not so much it looked like an ambush. I didn't bring everything, I told him. I brought enough. He looked at the slim folder, then at me, something proud and sad moving across his face. Your father would have done it just like this, he said. Quiet, careful. Once. I had to look away so I wouldn't cry before I'd even started. He squeezed my shoulder. After the toast, I'll ask you the question I always ask. The check question. You take it from there. The cruelest, kindest piece of the whole plan, that the warm line he'd asked me 100 times, the line my mother had spent 4 years steering him away from, would finally be the thing that opened the floor. The doorbell rang. I straightened my dress and went to greet my family with a smile. I should back up one night because the evening before I almost talked myself out of all of it, and I think you should know the steady one wobbles too. I called Olivia, the charge nurse who trained me, the closest thing I had to family that didn't share my blood. I told her everything in a rush, sitting in my car outside a grocery store. When I finished, she was quiet. Then, burnout isn't a badge, Megan. Neither is silence. I told her I was scared. Not of my sister, not of my mom, but of becoming the thing they'd surely call me. The one who blew up the family. The ungrateful daughter who chose money over blood at an old man's party. What if I'm the one who breaks us? I said. Olivia didn't miss a beat. Honey, they broke it 4 years ago. You're not breaking the family. You're just turning on the lights. I sat there with the phone against my ear and the grocery store sign buzzing pink in the windshield, and felt something settle. She was right. I hadn't forged a single signature. I hadn't taken $1. I hadn't lied to an old man about a granddaughter who loved him. All I was going to do was put the truth on a table and let people see what had been done in the dark in my name for years. That wasn't destruction. That was a light switch. I thanked her, drove home and actually slept for the first time in weeks. The party was beautiful. I'll give them that. My grandfather's dining room glowed with candles and the roses I'd arranged, white and blush, sent thick over everything. 14 people around the long table. Aunts, cousins, 2 of his oldest friends from his concrete days, Mr. Bennett nursing a club soda near the head. Brittany shimmered in something expensive. playing hostess of an evening she bought with money meant to keep me afloat. Derek moved around refilling wine glasses, easy and smiling. No idea the floor was about to open. My mom sat at my grandfather's right hand, where she always sat, the beautiful daughter, the one who handled everything. I sat near the far end, slim folder in my lap, roses breathing sweetness into a room that had no idea what was coming. I made small talk, complimented the catering, watched my family be charming and warm and convinced of their own goodness, and understood that, to all of them, this was simply a lovely night. The strange, cold gift of it. I was the only one at that table who knew we were sitting inside a crime scene, dressed in candlelight. My grandfather caught my eye once and gave the smallest nod. Then he tapped his fork against his wine glass, and the sound rang out clear, stopping every conversation in the room. He rose slow and certain, the man who'd built all of this from nothing. "Before we cut the cake," he said warmly, looking down the table at me, "I want to say something to my granddaughter." 14 warm faces turned toward me, glasses half raised, ready for the kind of sweet toast that ends with everyone dabbing their eyes. My grandfather looked at me, voice as gentle as ever, because he was a good actor when the truth required it, and asked the question he'd asked me 100 times. The one my mom had spent 4 years steering him away from. "How's that check treating you, sweetheart?" For half a second, the table chuckled, charmed, an old man fussing over his granddaughter. My mom's smile froze like frost. Down the table, Brittany's eyes snapped to me, then to our mother, then back, quick as a struck match. I set my wine glass down. The room waited for me to say I was getting by, the way I always did. I felt the whole shape of the evening balanced on what I said next, and underneath my ribs, that strange calm I knew from the worst nights in the year. The calm that comes when there's finally nothing left to do but the right thing. "Funny you should ask, Grandpa," I said. And I opened the folder, and I stopped being the family's quiet one for good. I took out the 3 checks and laid them in the center of the table, face up, side by side, where the candlelight caught them. Paid to the order of Megan Carter. $7,000. 3 months out of 46. His steady handwriting on every one. The table leaned in, confused. "Grandpa has been sending these," I said, voice level and clear. No tremor, no heat. $7,000 a month lately for almost 4 years. To help me through. I let that sit one beat. I never saw a single dollar. My mom's chair scraped back an inch. "Megan," she said, voice climbing into that warm, managing register I'd heard my whole life. "This is not the time. You're confused. Let's not do this at your grandfather's." "Turn the check over," I said. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't have to. The words dropped into the silence like a stone into a well, and the whole table went still. The quartet stopped. My mom's mouth was open, and my grandfather, standing at the head of his own table on his 80th birthday, reached down with a hand that didn't shake at all, picked up the nearest check, and turned it over so everyone could see the back. There was my name, Megan Carter, signed in a looping, confident hand that anyone who knew me would recognize at a glance as not mine. Deposited into an account that wasn't mine. The candlelight shook on the paper. Somewhere down the table, an aunt drew in a breath. My grandfather read the forged signature out loud, slow, every letter. Then he read the account number beneath it. Then he lifted his eyes, not to me but to my sister. "Brittany," he said, very quietly, holding up the back of the check. "Is that your account number?" The whole room had gone so still I could hear the candles. Brittany's face drained to the color of the tablecloth. She looked at the check, at our mother, at the 14 faces now turned toward her, and said nothing, which was somehow louder than anything she could have said. Derek set the wine bottle down on the sideboard with a small, careful click and took half a step back from the table, the way a man does when he realizes he's standing too close to something about to go off. I have run codes where a man's heart stopped under my hands and felt less stillness than that. "I didn't sign that," I said, and kept my voice as flat and clean as a fact. "And a forensic examiner already knows whose hand did." Brittany made a small sound, half laugh, half gasp, and shot to her feet so fast her chair toppled backward and cracked against the floor. "You," she started, and her glossy hostess composure came apart right there in front of his oldest friends. I didn't stand. I didn't flinch. I'd waited 4 years for the floor to drop, and now that it had, I found I didn't need to move at all. The truth was already on the table, face up and back up, and there was nothing she could do to put it back in the dark. She exploded the way cornered people do, loud, fast, aimed at me. You jealous miserable. You never spent a dime on yourself. You never wanted anything. The money was just sitting there. You think you're so noble in your little scrubs? It would have rotted. We used it. We made something of it. My mom was crying now, the practiced kind, reaching for my grandfather's sleeve. Daddy, I was going to pay it back. Every cent, I swear. I was going to lose the house. What was I supposed to do? Let your son-in-law's name go on the foreclosure? The words tumbled over each other, desperate, and the whole table watched a family come apart in real time. I stayed in my chair, stayed quiet, and let them be loud because their noise was doing my work for me. When there was finally a breath in it, I spoke softly so they had to go still to hear me. Mom, you told me you don't steal from family. You said you only borrow. I let the rose-sweet silence hold a moment. Show me the loan papers. She had none. Of course she had none. No agreement, no signature of mine consenting to any of it, no record of a single dollar coming back because it was never a loan and we both knew it. For years, I said, looking from my mom to my sister, calm as a bedside monitor. 3 jobs. Your account. 3 small facts set down one at a time, and not one of them could be argued with. Brittany was breathing hard. Derek wouldn't meet anyone's eyes. And at the head of the table, my grandfather, who hadn't said anything for a full minute, finally set down the check, stood to his full height and said, "Enough." He did not rescue me. I want that understood because it was the whole point. He stood at the head of his table and spoke as the second person robbed, not as the hero of my story. For 4 years, he said, voice rough but carrying, I thought my Megan took my help and couldn't be bothered to call me. I thought she'd grown distant. I grieved that. I have a card in my wallet. I thought she wrote me. He turned slowly toward my mom. You wrote it, didn't you, Lorraine? You wrote to me as my own granddaughter. It wasn't a question. She didn't answer it. The silence answered it. Then Mr. Bennett, who'd been a guest all evening, set down his club soda and spoke for the first time, mild and precise. I choose your next words carefully, all of you. I'm not here as a guest anymore. Signing another person's name to take a negotiable instrument, and writing letters in that person's name to obtain more, can amount to forgery under state law, and very possibly theft by deception. This is the sort of thing a prosecutor looks at. It should be handled properly starting now. The word forgery moved around that table like a cold draft. I looked at my mom and my sister and did the last thing I'd planned, the thing I'd practiced in the mirror until my voice wouldn't shake. I don't need an apology tonight. I've stopped needing those. What I need is the money returned, and a report filed where it belongs. I closed the folder. The flowers are paid for. I'll send you the bill for those too. And I stood up, and for the first time in my life, I walked out of a family dinner with my head perfectly level. I drove home through the dark, hands steady on the wheel. The same steadiness I have walking out of a room where we've lost a patient. That hollow, ringing calm that means the hard part is over, and the cost hasn't landed yet. I thought it was finished. I really did. I thought turning those checks over was the worst and the best of the whole thing, and that whatever came next was just lawyers and paperwork. I poured myself a glass of water in my own quiet kitchen, and let myself exhale for the first time in weeks. Then just past 11 my phone rang. Patricia's name on the screen. Late, far too late for good news. Something in my chest tightened the way it does when the call light goes off in the room you were most afraid of. I almost didn't answer. I'm glad I did. And I'm not sure I'll ever be glad again the same way, because what she told me in the next 2 minutes took everything I thought I understood and split it wide open. Turning over those checks hadn't been the bottom of it. It had only been the part you could see above the water.